January meeting of PJAT, our Peace and Justice Action Team, we did an exercise in which we identified some paradoxes in our lives and the life of our church. Being frugal and generous at the same time, for instance. Supporting individual rights and collective responsibility at the same time. Holding on and letting go at the same time. And more. My message today is about another paradox, about how accompanying someone through difficult and painful times can be heart-wrenching, and at the same time, it can be life-affirming and one of the deepest expressions of our shared humanity. But it doesn't just happen, of course, it requires giving and receiving. How many of you have trouble receiving help? Anybody? Is that anybody here? Yeah. Okay, I'm going to come back to us in a few minutes. First, I want to tell you how I learned about this paradox. In the early 90s, I was working across the bay in a software development group, and one day a colleague of mine, a young man named Sonny, was gunned down in the doorway of his home by some teenagers who mistook him for a member of a rival gang. A group of us went to the memorial service, and afterwards I decided to be really brave and say something to his wife. Most of my life I had avoided bereaved people because I thought you were supposed to say something comforting, and I never knew what to say. But fortunately, by then I had learned that you don't have to say something comforting, and in fact, it's much better not to try. All you have to do is say, "I'm sorry." So I went boldly up to Sonny's wife. I had not met her before, but she was easy to spot, a young woman dressed in black, surrounded by solicitous people. She was sitting, and I didn't want to tower over her, so I knelt in front of her and introduced myself and offered my hand in greeting. She took it, and she held onto it while we talked. I explained who I was, part of a group from work, that we would miss him, and finally, simply, "I'm sorry." And she said, "Thank you for coming." I know it doesn't sound like much, but kneeling there, clasping her hand, looking into her eyes, sharing that moment of grief with her was one of the most profound moments of my life. I've got goosebumps saying that now. In 10 seconds, I made a deeper human connection with a complete stranger than I have ever known with people I had known for years. It was heartbreaking, and at the same time, it was deeply reassuring. This encounter was so short, and yet it had two essential ingredients, giving and receiving. I gave my attention, my care. My unspoken message was, "I see you. I care about you. I see your pain. Your pain matters to me. You matter. You are not alone." And she could have just said thank you and looked away, but she didn't. She clasped my hand, looked deeply into my eyes, and shared her pain with me for that moment. In receiving my gift in that way, she gave me back a gift that changed my life. I have no idea whether she remembers that moment. I haven't seen her since, but I will remember it for the rest of my life. In the 30 years since then, I've had many opportunities to be on both the giving side and the receiving side. In 2002, my partner Susan and I and my sister Nancy were in a car accident that left Nancy bruised, me concussed, and Susan with a concussion and multiple pelvic fractures. She had 3 days in intensive care, a week in the hospital, a couple of weeks in rehab, and then we finally got her home to a rented hospital bed, which we put in the middle of the living room, because where else would it go? And she held court there for the next month. There's a picture I wish I could have shared with you of her lying on the bed conducting Beethoven. The accident and its aftermath was a watershed moment in our lives. It was painful, it was hard, and It strengthened and enriched us in so many ways. The first month was frustratingly hard for Susan because she was always trying to do the next thing that she couldn't quite do. But for me, it was a hard time too, watching her, but it was also an enchanted time because every day there was a miracle. Every day she could do something that she couldn't do the day before. Saying a whole sentence, right? Sitting up, standing up, eating a whole meal. There was one moment, this is when she was in rehab, where I noticed that she moved her hips. She went up, over, she was lying on her back. She went up, over, and down. And I said, "You moved your hips." And she said, "What?" She hadn't even noticed. Every time before, when she had moved her hips, it was up, over, down, because it was painful and slow and painful. This time it was just boop, boop, boop. That was one of the miracles, right? So I had a little notebook in my pocket. I don't carry a purse, I would just leave it somewhere. I had this notebook in my pocket and a pen, and every day I wrote down the miracle of the day. And when Susan got discouraged, I would remind her how far she'd come by reading to her from the Book of Miracles. In the second month, she was able to get around by herself slowly, but it was tough, and I was always there to be of service whenever she needed me. I slept on the sofa so I could get up for the 4 a.m. pain pill and the yogurt or toast that had to go with it. And again, it was hard, but at the same time, this is going to sound weird, it was one of the happiest times of my life. The word that comes to mind for it is ecstasy, from the Greek ex, outside, and static, standing, literally standing outside oneself. I set myself aside for that month and focused entirely on her, and it gave me a high. We have evolved as a species to get neurochemical rewards for being of service to others. Isn't that interesting? There is an evolutionary advantage to being of service to others. Now, acts of service can come from a variety of attitudes, right? They can come from superiority, so they sound patronizing. They can come from obligation, so they sound resentful. Or they can come from love, so they sound heartwarming. Humility is an important element of this, and I'm talking here about the humility that says, right here, in this moment, I am not the most important person here. When we move ourselves out of the center of attention for a while and center someone else instead, magical things happen. It creates a holy space where we can experience the other as a beautiful human being. I believe this opens the door to deep human connections. During Susan's recovery, I was blessed with a boss who said, "Don't even think about work until Susan is better. Because at the end of your life, if you've worked a few weeks more, so what? But if you have helped Susan through this, that will be big." And it was, for both of us. I set out to be a rock, always there, always ready to help, and a soft blanket, warm and comforting. Another paradox, right? How can you be a rock and a soft blanket at the same time? And she thrived on it. She leaned on me, she trusted me, and that reinforced her own strength and determination to get well. It connected us in a way that good times never could. We learned some practical things from the accident. For example, we learned what a difference it makes having family or friends there with the patient in the hospital or rehab. It can help the patient in a variety of ways, plus you just get better service. You don't have to chat the whole time. In fact, it's much better for the patient if you don't, but just being there, reading or whatever, helping when needed, that can make a big difference. We learned the importance of a support team, and that sometimes the primary support team needs their own support team. Doesn't have to be big. We didn't belong to the church then, or we'd have asked for help, but we managed ourselves with me focusing exclusively on Susan. And Nancy, who was living with us at the time, did the grocery shopping, the cooking, the dishes, the laundry. Nancy made it possible for me to focus entirely on Susan. After Susan was better, we had Take Care of Nancy month for a month, where we did her laundry and put food in front of her so that she could experience that, how being cared for in that way, what that felt like. Other family members and friends showed up and visited too. We also learned the importance of bringing the right kind of energy to these situations and managing who visits to ensure that visitors bring calm, healing energy with them. This leads us to ring theory. Ring theory was invented by a woman named Susan Silk after an experience she had recovering from cancer surgery. She didn't want visitors at all, but a colleague was determined to visit and said, "It's not just about you, you know." And Susan thought, "Really? My breast cancer isn't just about me?" So that led to the ring theory. Imagine a series of concentric rings with the patient in the middle, the next ring out is close family, maybe a few close friends, and farther out rings, more distant connections with the patient. And the basic principle of ring theory is this: care goes in, venting goes out. Venting, tearing your hair, screaming, crying, whatever, that all goes out. Most of us know not to do that with the patient, but if we're not trained in ring theory, we might pick someone closer to the patient than we are, and that's a mistake. So, for example, one time Susan Silk had a friend in the hospital who was in pretty rough shape, so, tubes everywhere and stuff. And another friend came to visit, and she took one look and then stepped out into the hallway with the patient's husband and said, "I wasn't prepared for this. I don't know if I can handle it." Now, that is a legitimate feeling. No one is saying dismiss it. Just think about who you're saying it to, right? It's about noticing who is caring for whom and who you are asking to care for you. People on rings inside yours are focused towards the patient or the people around the patient. And if you, from the outside, say, "Hey, take care of me," they have to turn around and take care of you instead. So definitely get support, ask for support, the support you need, but from somebody in a ring outside you. And this concept is useful in many circumstances, not just this one. 3 years ago, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. I was lucky. The tumor was about this big, and the treatment was relatively mild. But in the beginning, we didn't know that, and we were anxious. So I got a website called Caring Bridge and created an account for myself. And every time there was news, I posted an update there. I shared the website with practically everyone I knew so they could get updates from Caring Bridge. And every time I posted an update, encouraging, loving replies poured in. It was fantastic. The big advantage of a site like Caring Bridge is if you're blessed with a lot of people who care about you, and if you're a member of this church or one that's similar, then you have a lot of people who care about you. It's hard to keep everyone updated. Who have you told what to? Who have you forgotten? It can be stressful trying to keep everyone up to date. With a service like this, you tell one place, and then other people can get notified, so they get up-to-the-minute information. They can go and read what you've said, and without having to keep checking. And you don't need to worry that you've forgotten someone important. In the course of my breast cancer treatment, as I moved through the stages and learned more about it, I would update Caring Bridge, and dozens of people would reply with words of love or encouragement. I've never felt so loved in my entire life. I would just sit there and read the messages over and over and soak it in. It was fantastic. This is a very simple thing you can do for someone. Even if the messages you leave are quite short, if lots of people are doing it, it adds up. So having cancer was one of the toughest things I've had to deal with that was specifically about me, it really was just about me. And it was one of the best because of all the love that poured in. Back to the paradox I mentioned at the start about how accompanying someone through painful times can be heartbreaking and at the same time life-affirming. There is an asymmetry to it. The pain part comes for free. It just happens. Life dishes it out. The complementary part, the life-affirming part, does not just happen. It requires giving, and it requires receiving, an intentional gift of love and an appreciative response. I'm not talking about gratitude exactly, though it's related and it might show up. I'm just talking about receiving the love, feeling the love and being touched by it, opening your heart and letting the love in. Think to yourself of a time when you offered loving care to someone and they received it and were warmed by it and lifted up by it. It doesn't have to be a life or death thing. It could be as simple as calling a friend to wish them a happy birthday and they were surprised and pleased that you called. I'm going to give you a moment to remember, and especially remember how you felt. And then if you want to share a word or a short phrase about how you felt, we'll do that. So I'll give you a minute. Think of a time you did something for somebody. Maybe something little, but they were warmed by it. And how did that feel? Okay, let's start on Zoom. If anybody on Zoom would like to share a word or a phrase, it's got to be short because actually I don't have to repeat it when it's on Zoom. For roomies, I'm going to repeat it, so it definitely has to be short. But Zoomies, any words come to mind, how you felt in that situation? And this is optional. If you're just in the feeling, that's fabulous. Anyone here want to share something? How did that feel?
Appreciated.
Appreciated.
Useful.
Useful.
Connected.
Connected.
Closer.
Closer. I don't know about you, I feel strong in that situation sometimes. Okay. A lot of us find it considerably harder to receive help than to give it because our hyper-individualistic culture says we're supposed to be completely independent and take care of ourselves in every way, and needing help is a sign of weakness. But there is something we can do about this. We can be aware of the things that we tell ourselves about what something means, and we can tell ourselves different things. We can influence the meaning that we ascribe to things. So suppose you've had surgery, for instance, and you really need help. You can't do much by yourself, and loving help flows in. When that happens, you could make it mean, I'm weak, I'm helpless, I'm a burden, I'm no good. Or you could make it mean, I'm even more loved than I realized. How cool is that? I took food one time to a church member who was recovering from surgery. She showed me her freezer, which was chock-a-block full of food church people had brought her, including a big lasagna that somebody had baked for her. I don't know if she ever actually ate that lasagna, but I am certain that every time she opened her freezer, she felt loved and cared about. So to me, this is the first key of receiving loving care. Don't make it mean you're inadequate. Instead, make it mean how loved you are, because it's true. You are. The second key is to remember what a cool feeling it is to help someone else, and give someone else that cool feeling by letting them help you. The receiving is what makes the giving rewarding. And when I say receiving, I'm not talking about gratitude per se. And I had a friend who grew up poor and other people did things for their family, and I had to be grateful, she said. But of course, she wasn't grateful, she was resentful. So If you're thinking, I have to be grateful, let go of that and just open your heart to the love. Now, I have a message from our pastoral care team. If you need help, if you want to give other people the gift of being of service and receive the blessings of service yourself, please reach out to the Pastoral Care Committee. They are Daryl Ray, Al Murdoch, who might be on Zoom, Allison Prout. Do you guys want to wave or something? Allison, Mike Zampacini, Karen Kramer, and of course, Reverend Soley. So can you all like wave or something? Does everybody know who these people are? Karen, wave bigger. There's Daryl. There's Daryl. There's Mike. Thank you. Thank you, thank you. Okay. In conclusion, I would like to offer a little advice. If someone is facing something difficult, someone you know, and you can be of service without being a martyr, lean in, be bold. The harder it is, the more your love and support will matter, and the more life-affirming it will be for everyone. And sometimes you just need to be the rabbit that listened. If you're in a position to receive help, lean back. Let yourself be held in love. Bask in it. Let it fill your heart, your soul, your spirit. Absorb it into every cell of your body. Because being together in love and care in times of pain and grief is one of the most precious and sacred expressions of our humanity. This process of giving with love and receiving the love, giving it back, blesses everyone involved. It is a gift of grace. And don't miss all the little miracles.